The moment I realized my husband and his mother had saved a seat for everyone at that family dinner except me, I didn't cry, I didn't beg, and I didn't ask where I was supposed to sit. I simply smiled, walked to the hostess stand, asked for a table for one, and ordered the most expensive meal on the menu while they watched me from across the restaurant like I had just embarrassed them instead of finally choosing myself. And the funny thing is, if you had asked me a year earlier what I would have done in that situation, I probably would have said I would have squeezed in somewhere, laughed it off, told myself it wasn't a big deal, and spent the rest of the night pretending I wasn't hurt, because that was what I had become very good at in my marriage, pretending small humiliations were accidents, pretending disrespect was just someone having a bad day, pretending my mother-in-law's little comments were harmless, pretending my husband's silence didn't say more than any insult ever could. My name is Claire, I'm 34, and I was married to a man named William for almost 7 years. William was the kind of husband people loved in public, polite, charming, always holding doors open for strangers, always laughing at the right moments, always making people feel like he was thoughtful. That was the version everyone got, and for a long time I convinced myself that version was the real one. The problem was, when we were alone or when his mother was around, William became smaller somehow, not physically but emotionally, like every opinion he had disappeared the moment she entered the room. His mother, Marlene, was one of those women who didn't raise her voice because she didn't need to. She could ruin your entire mood with one quiet sentence and still make herself look innocent. She never called me ugly, she would just say, "That color is brave on you." She never called me lazy, she would just look around my house and say, "Well, everyone has different standards." She never said I wasn't good enough for her son, but every birthday, every holiday, every family dinner she made sure I felt like I was a guest in a life where I was supposed to be a wife. At first I tried to win her over. I brought desserts to gatherings, I remembered everyone's birthdays, I helped clean up after dinners I didn't host, I bought thoughtful gifts, I complimented her cooking, I asked about her garden, I even sat through hours of stories about William's childhood while she found creative ways to remind me that she knew him first. And William always told me the same thing afterward: "She doesn't mean anything by it, babe, that's just how she is." That sentence became the soundtrack of my marriage. That's just how she is. As if being cruel was a personality trait everyone else had to respect. The dinner happened on a Saturday evening in June. It was supposed to be a celebration for William's cousin Elise, who had just gotten engaged. The whole family was meeting at a nice Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths, soft lighting, and waiters who asked if you wanted sparkling or still water before you even sat down. I actually looked forward to it because Elise was one of the few people in William's family who had always been kind to me. She wasn't fake sweet, she was just normal, and sometimes normal feels like kindness when you're used to being picked apart. That afternoon I spent more time getting ready than I usually did. I curled my hair, put on a navy dress William had once said he loved, and wore the earrings my father gave me before he passed. I remember standing in front of the mirror, hoping the night would be peaceful. That sounds sad now, but that was honestly where my expectations were: not joy, not love, not even fun, just peace. William barely looked up from his phone when I walked into the living room. "You ready?" he asked. I smiled and said, "Yeah. Do I look okay?" He glanced at me for half a second and said, "You look fine." Fine. I should have known right then what kind of night it was going to be. When we got to the restaurant, most of the family was already there. I saw Marlene immediately because she had positioned herself at the center of the long table like a queen holding court. William's brother and his wife were there, his cousins, aunts, uncles, even a few family friends. Everyone was laughing, moving around, kissing cheeks, saying hello, and for one small second I thought maybe this would be easy. Then I saw the chairs. There were place settings for everyone, little folded napkins, water glasses, menus laid out neatly, but when William walked ahead of me and kissed his mother on the cheek, I noticed he slipped into the empty chair right beside her. His mother touched his arm like she had been waiting for him. Then I looked around the table, searching for the seat that was meant for me. There wasn't one. At first, my brain tried to protect me. I told myself maybe someone was in the bathroom, maybe there was another chair being brought over, maybe I was missing something. So I stood there for a second, holding my little purse in both hands, while conversations continued around me like I was part of the wallpaper. Elise noticed first. Her smile dropped slightly and she looked at the table, then at me. "Oh Claire, wait, where's your seat?" she asked. Before I could answer, Marlene gave this delicate little laugh, the one she used when she wanted to make cruelty sound like etiquette. "Oh, I told them the exact number William gave me," she said, looking at me with a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. I turned to William, expecting him to stand up or at least look embarrassed, but he just stared at the menu like the appetizers had suddenly become fascinating. I said quietly. He didn't look at me right away. Then he gave a small shrug and said they can probably bring another chair. Another chair. Not I'm sorry. Not Mom, why didn't you include my wife? Not here, take my seat. Just they can probably bring another chair. And then Marlene added, it might be tight though. This table is already crowded. That was the moment everything inside me went still. Not loud, not dramatic, just still. Because I understood something I had avoided understanding for years. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. They had planned a family dinner, counted heads, arranged seats, and somehow the only person forgotten was the woman William had promised to put first. I looked at that long table, at the people pretending not to watch, at William sitting comfortably beside his mother, at Marlene's satisfied little expression, and something in me finally refused to perform sadness for people who enjoyed causing it. So I smiled. Not a big smile, not a fake bright one, just a calm little smile. Then I said, no worries. William looked relieved, like he thought I was about to make myself small again. But instead of waiting for a chair, I turned around and walked straight back to the hostess stand. The hostess, a young woman with a kind face, looked up and said, hi, can I help you? I said, yes, table for one, please. She blinked, then glanced behind me at the big family table. For one? Yes, I said. Somewhere comfortable, please. To her credit, she didn't ask questions. She just smiled and said, of course. And as she led me to a small booth near the window, I could feel every eye from William's table following me. I sat down, placed my purse beside me, opened the menu and took the deepest breath I had taken in years. For the first time that night I had space. Actual space. No one elbowing me, no one making comments about my dress, no one asking me to pass bread while ignoring my existence, no one expecting me to smile through disrespect. A waiter came over and asked if I wanted something to drink. I looked at the wine list, then at the table across the room where William was now whispering to his mother, and I said, I'll have a glass of the Cabernet. And I'm ready to order too. He smiled. Great, what can I get for you? I ordered the burrata, the lobster ravioli, a side of roasted vegetables and tiramisu for later. I didn't even check the prices. I wasn't trying to be reckless. I was trying to remind myself that I was allowed to enjoy a meal without earning my place at the table first. A few minutes later, William appeared beside my booth. He looked annoyed, not worried. What are you doing? He asked under his breath. I looked up at him calmly. Having dinner. Claire, come on. Don't make this weird. I almost laughed because that was always his real concern. Not that I was hurt, not that his mother had excluded me, not that he had sat down without me, but that I might make it uncomfortable for everyone else. I folded my hands on the table and said, I'm not making anything weird. I found a seat. His jaw tightened. They were going to bring another chair. Eventually, I said. Maybe. If it wasn't too tight. He looked back toward his family table, then leaned closer. You're embarrassing me. And that was when I knew with perfect clarity that the marriage I thought I was saving had already been dead for a long time. Because a husband who watches his wife be humiliated and only reacts when she stops accepting it is not protecting the marriage, he is protecting the people who disrespect it. I held his gaze for a second, not angry, not even emotional, just clear, like I was finally seeing him without all the excuses I used to wrap around his behavior. And I said, William, you were fine when I was the one being embarrassed, so don't start caring about it now that I'm not playing along. He opened his mouth like he was about to argue, but nothing came out, and for once I didn't wait to hear what he would say next. I simply picked up my glass of wine, took a slow sip, and looked back down at my menu like he was just another interruption, not the center of my world. He stood there for a few seconds, shifting his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Then he muttered, we'll talk about this at home, and walked back to his table where his mother immediately leaned in, whispering something in his ear while glancing at me with that same soft, controlled smile she always wore when she thought she had won. But she hadn't. Not this time. My food came out warm, perfectly plated, and for the first time in a long time, I actually tasted what I was eating, instead of rushing through a meal while trying to keep up with conversations that were never meant to include me. The burrata was fresh and creamy, the tomatoes sweet, the olive oil rich, and I remember thinking how strange it was that something so simple could feel like such a luxury, just sitting alone, eating in peace, not having to prove anything to anyone. Every now and then, I glanced at the long table across the room, not because I missed being there, but because I wanted to observe it without being inside it, And what I saw was something I had never fully allowed myself to admit before. The laughter wasn't as warm as I used to think. The conversations were layered with subtle competition, little interruptions, people talking over each other, Marlene directing the energy of the table like a conductor who needed to stay in control, and William sitting beside her, nodding, smiling, blending into her rhythm like he always did. It hit me then, I hadn't been excluded from something good, I had been released from something that was slowly shrinking me. Halfway through my main course, Elise excused herself from the table and walked over to me. She slid into the seat across from me without asking, her expression soft but serious. "Hey," she said quietly. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "I am actually." She looked surprised. "I'm really sorry about that. It wasn't right." "I know," I said, and for the first time saying those words didn't feel like complaining, it felt like acknowledging something real. She glanced back at the table, then leaned in a little. "You didn't deserve that. And for what it's worth, everyone noticed." I gave a small smile. "They noticed, but they didn't say anything." She sighed. "That's kind of how it works in this family." "I know," I said again, but this time there was no bitterness in my voice, just clarity. We talked for a few minutes about her engagement, about her fiancé, about normal things, and it felt easy, the way conversations are supposed to feel when they're not weighed down by judgment. Before she left, she touched my hand and said, "You handled that better than I would have." I laughed softly. "That's because I've had years of practice pretending things don't bother me." She shook her head. "No, tonight you didn't pretend. That's the difference." When she walked back to the table, I sat there for a moment, letting her words settle, because she was right, I hadn't pretended, and somehow that felt more powerful than any argument I could have made. By the time I finished my dessert, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, not happiness exactly, but relief, like I had finally stopped holding my breath. I asked for the check, paid it without hesitation, and as I stood up to leave, I smoothed out my dress, picked up my purse, and took one last look at the table across the room. William was laughing at something his brother had said, his hand resting casually on the table, his mother leaning toward him, still talking, still guiding the energy, and for a second I tried to remember what it felt like to want to walk back into that space, to sit beside him, to belong there. I couldn't. Not anymore. So I turned and walked out of the restaurant. The air outside was warm, the kind of summer night that feels soft against your skin, and I stood there for a moment, just breathing, letting the quiet wrap around me. I could have called a ride, I could have gone home and waited for William so we could have the same argument we had been having in different forms for years, but instead I started walking. I walked past lit storefronts, past couples holding hands, past people laughing on patios, and with every step I felt lighter, not because my life had suddenly changed, but because something inside me had shifted in a way I couldn't undo. About 20 minutes later, my phone started ringing. "William." I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Finally I answered. "What?" I said, not cold, just tired of pretending I wasn't allowed to be direct. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice tense. I said. "He just left," he snapped. Without saying anything. I stopped walking and leaned against a railing, looking out at the street. "I didn't think I needed permission to leave a place where I didn't have a seat," I said. There was a pause on the other end. "That's not what happened," he said quickly. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I closed my eyes for a second, not out of frustration but out of recognition, because there it was again, the pattern, the minimizing, the rewriting of reality. "No," I said calmly. "I'm seeing it clearly for once." He exhaled sharply. "Claire, my mom didn't do it on purpose." "William," I said, and my voice didn't shake, which surprised even me, "your mom counted everyone at that table, made reservations, arranged seating, and somehow forgot your wife, and you sat down anyway. She said there was a misunderstanding." "And you believed her," I said. He hesitated. "I didn't want to make a scene." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "You didn't want to make a scene, so you let me stand there with no place to sit." "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that." Another pause, heavier this time. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Over a chair." And that question, more than anything else, told me everything I needed to know. Because to him it was about a chair. To me, it was about every moment I had been quietly pushed aside. Every time his mother had chipped away at my place in his life, every time he had chosen comfort over respect, every time I had told myself it wasn't worth fighting over. "It's not about a chair," I said softly. "It's about the fact that I don't belong in your life the way I thought I did." "That's not true," he said quickly. "You're my wife." "Then act like it," I replied. He didn't answer right away. "Come home," he said finally. I looked down the street at the people moving, at the lights, at everything continuing as if nothing had happened, and I realized something simple but terrifying at the same time. I didn't want to go home. Not to that version of my life. I'm not ready to talk, I said. What does that mean? He asked. It means I'm going to stay somewhere else tonight. Silence. Then you're being dramatic. And for the first time in years, that word didn't make me question myself. It made me smile. Good night, William, I said, and I hung up. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going back to a table where I had to earn a seat that should have been mine all along. I stood there for a moment after the call ended, my phone still in my hand, the screen dark now, and I realized something that felt both terrifying and freeing at the same time. I had just done something I had never done before. I had chosen discomfort over familiarity, uncertainty over routine, and myself over a version of love that kept asking me to shrink. I didn't go far that night. I booked a small boutique hotel a few blocks away. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, and mine for the night. And when I walked into that room, kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, the silence didn't feel lonely, it felt honest. No tension, no waiting for someone else's mood to shift, no walking on eggshells, no wondering if a comment was about me, just stillness, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to sit in it without trying to fix anything. William called again that night, more than once, but I didn't answer, not because I wanted to punish him but because I knew exactly how the conversation would go. He would tell me I overreacted, I would try to explain why it mattered, he would get defensive, I would get tired, and somehow by the end of it I would be the one apologizing for making things difficult. I wasn't doing that again. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual, sunlight coming through the thin curtains, soft and quiet, and for a few seconds I forgot where I was. Then it all came back, the dinner, the table, the look on Marlene's face, William's silence, my own voice finally saying enough. My phone was full of messages. William, we need to talk. You can't just disappear like that. My mom feels terrible. Call me. I stared at that last message for a while. My mom feels terrible, and I almost laughed, not because it was funny but because it was so predictable. Somehow the focus had already shifted to her feelings, her discomfort, her version of what happened. And I could almost hear the conversation they must have had after I left, Marlene explaining, William defending, the rest of the family nodding along, smoothing it over, calling it a misunderstanding so no one had to take responsibility. I typed a message back. I'll come by later to pick up some things. I didn't say I was coming home. Because I wasn't. When I got there that afternoon, the house felt the same on the outside, the same driveway, the same front door, the same quiet neighborhood. But something about it didn't feel like mine anymore, like I had stepped out of a version of my life and now I was looking at it from the outside. William opened the door before I even knocked. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept much, his hair slightly messy, his expression a mix of frustration and something softer, something that almost looked like concern. Claire, he said, stepping aside. Come in. I walked past him without saying anything, my eyes scanning the space, everything exactly where it had always been, the couch, the framed photos, the little things I had chosen, arranged, cared for, all of it suddenly feeling like part of a story I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. We need to talk, he said, closing the door behind me. I'm not here to talk, I replied calmly. I'm here to grab some things. His expression tightened. So that's it? You're just leaving? I turned to face him. No, William, that's not it. This didn't start last night. He ran a hand through his hair. You're making this bigger than it is. I held his gaze. That's the problem. You think it's small. He sighed, like he was already tired of the conversation. Claire, it was a mistake. My mom already said she didn't mean anything by it. Of course she did, I said. He always does. That's not fair. What's not fair, I replied, my voice still steady, is standing in a room full of people and realizing the only person who's supposed to have your back is perfectly fine watching you be excluded. He shook his head. I didn't watch you be excluded, I told you they could bring another chair. And there it was again, that same sentence, that same attempt to reduce everything to logistics, to avoid the part that actually mattered. I didn't need a chair, I said quietly. I needed a husband. That landed. I saw it in the way his shoulders dropped slightly, in the way his expression shifted for just a second, like something I said finally broke through the wall he had been hiding behind. I am your husband, he said, but his voice wasn't as firm now. Then why does it feel like I've been on my own this entire time? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead he said, so what, you're just going to walk away? Over this? I took a slow breath. I'm not walking away over this. I'm walking away because this showed me what I've been ignoring for years. He looked at me like he wanted to argue but didn't have the words. I'm tired, William, I continued. I'm tired of being the only one trying to make this work. I'm tired of pretending your mom's behavior is normal. I'm tired of you choosing silence every time it matters. That's not true, he said, but it sounded weaker now. It is, I said. And you know it. There was a long pause, the kind that fills a room when both people know something important is happening but don't know how to stop it. What do you want me to say? He asked finally. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see the man I had built my future around. I saw someone who had never actually fought for me the way I had fought for him. I wanted you to say something last night, I said softly. I wanted you to stand up, even just a little, even just enough to show me I matter in that room. I didn't think it was that serious, he admitted. I know, I said. And that was the problem. I walked past him toward the bedroom, opened the closet, and started pulling out a suitcase. What are you doing? He asked. Packing, I said. For how long? I paused, then said, I don't know yet. He leaned against the door frame watching me, and for a moment he looked like he wanted to stop me, like he wanted to say something that would fix it, but whatever that thing was, it never came. I can talk to my mom, he said instead. We can set boundaries. I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was too late for promises that should have been actions years ago. You've had 7 years to do that, I said. She'll listen this time. No, I replied gently. You'll listen this time. And that's the difference. He frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm not waiting around to see if you finally decide to treat me like I matter, I said. I'm going to treat myself like I matter. I zipped up the suitcase, the sound loud in the quiet room, and picked it up. Where are you going? He asked. Somewhere I don't have to question my place, I said. And as I walked past him toward the front door, I felt that same stillness from the night before, not cold this time, just steady, like I had finally stopped fighting something that was never really mine to fix. Behind me, he said my name one more time. Claire. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. Yeah. Are you really going to throw everything away? I closed my eyes for a second, then opened them, looking straight ahead. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm just finally seeing what was never really there. I didn't slam the door behind me, I didn't make a scene, I just walked out with my suitcase in one hand and a kind of calm I didn't recognize yet, because it wasn't happiness, it wasn't relief exactly, it was clarity. The kind that comes after you stop arguing with reality and just accept it for what it is. The first few days were the hardest, not because I missed William in the way people imagine, but because I had to sit with everything I had ignored for years, all the moments I had brushed off, all the times I had told myself it wasn't that bad, all the little compromises that slowly turned into a life where I didn't feel fully seen. I stayed at the hotel for 2 nights, then moved into a short-term rental, something simple, just enough space for me and my thoughts, and for the first time, my environment felt like a reflection of me, not something I was adjusting myself to fit into. William kept calling, texting, sending long messages that started with "I've been thinking," and ended with "we can fix this," and for a while I didn't answer, not because I hated him, but because I needed distance from the version of myself that always rushed to fix things before fully understanding them. About a week later I agreed to meet him. We chose a quiet coffee shop, neutral ground, no history, no shared memories. Just 2 people sitting across from each other with everything that hadn't been said finally sitting between them. He looked different, not physically but in the way he carried himself, less certain, less comfortable, like he was finally aware that something real was at stake. Thank you for coming, he said. I nodded. I'm not here to argue. Me neither, he said quickly. I want to understand. And for once I believed that he meant it. So I told him everything, not in a dramatic way, not raising my voice, not trying to win, just calmly, honestly. I told him how it felt to stand there without a seat, how it wasn't about that one moment, how it connected to years of feeling secondary in my own marriage, how his silence had hurt more than anything his mother had ever said. He listened, really listened, not interrupting, not defending, just taking it in, and when I finished there was a long pause. I didn't see it like that, he said quietly. I know, I replied. That doesn't make it okay, he added. No, it doesn't. He ran his hands together, nervous. I thought keeping the peace was the right thing to do. At whose expense? I asked gently. He didn't answer right away because he didn't need to, he already knew. I've been talking to someone, he said after a moment. A therapist. That caught my attention. And? I asked. And I'm starting to realize how much I've let my mom influence things, he admitted. Not just with you, with everything. I nodded slowly. That's a start. I want to fix this, he said. I want to be better. And there it was, the moment I had imagined so many times before. The moment where he finally acknowledged everything, where he finally wanted to change, where he finally saw me the way I had been asking to be seen for years. But something was different now. Before, I would have leaned forward, grabbed onto that hope, and done everything I could to rebuild what we had. This time I just sat there. "William," I said softly, "I believe that you want to change." His eyes lit up a little. "Then let me." I shook my head, not harshly, just honestly. Wanting to change and actually changing are two different things, and I can't stay in the same place hoping you figure it out. "So what are you saying?" he asked, his voice tight. "I'm saying I need more than promises," I replied. "I need consistency, I need effort, I need to feel like I matter without having to fight for it." "I can give you that," he said quickly. "Maybe," I said. "But I can't risk myself waiting to see if you will." The words hung there between us, heavy but clear. "So this is it?" he asked quietly. I took a deep breath because even with all the clarity it still hurt. "This is me choosing myself," I said. He looked down at the table, then back up at me. "I never thought you'd leave." "I know," I said. And that was the truth. Because for years I hadn't thought I would either. We sat there for a few more minutes, not saying much, just letting the reality settle, and when it was time to leave he stood up like he wanted to hug me, but he hesitated, unsure of his place now. So I gave him a small, polite smile. The kind you give someone who was once your whole world and now is just part of your story. "Take care of yourself," I said. "You too," he replied. And then I walked away. A few months later, I heard through Elise that things in the family had shifted, not dramatically, not overnight, but enough to notice. William had started setting small boundaries, speaking up more, not just with me gone but in general, and Marlene didn't like it. Of course she didn't, but for the first time she wasn't the one controlling everything. Me. I built something new. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. I found a small apartment, decorated it the way I wanted, filled it with things that made me feel comfortable. I started saying no without explaining myself. I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable, and slowly I started to recognize myself again, not as someone's wife, not as someone trying to fit into a family that never made space for her, but as someone whole on her own. And sometimes, late at night, I think back to that dinner, to that long table, to the empty space where my seat should have been, and I realize something that still surprises me. They didn't leave me without a place. They showed me I had been sitting at the wrong table all along. And the moment I stood up and chose my own, I didn't lose anything. I finally stopped losing myself.